Big smile, Mom.
Happy birthday, Grandma. Make a wish, Grandma.
Ma, come over here. I have a special present from all of us. Sit down, Ma. I've got something I want you to see.
Oh, where did you come from? Gary, look at the TV.
It's the Don Dillon
That's my
Show,
guy on TV.
starring Bryony Twinkletoes Dillon, the singing Dillon sisters,
soon be there.
and the juggling grandpa Clifford Dillon. Tonight's show features Stewie Dillon's game-winning home run and scenes from the Sarah Dillon wedding.
That's me.
And tonight,
That's
live
me
from
again.
Great Neck, Long Island, Grandma Dillon's 63rd birthday party.
If you think network television is a little boring, start your own network. With the Sony Betamax and the portable Sony videotape camera, you can do just that. You can record what you want when you want, and watch what you want when you want. It's the best family entertainment on television.
One more shot, Ma. Come on, smile.
This is the best birthday I've ever had.
So, granted, I'm very fortunate to have grown up in the tail end of the VHS era, with a lot of my formative and earliest memories being around movies, starting as far back as I'd say around 2001, being mostly on tape and VHS. Even though in my household, we weren't a VHS or DVD exclusive household, I remember that we were a little bit of a late adopter or to DVD, but my house was mostly a bootleg household, which I will talk about more in the respective bootlegging of their individual formats. Even though me myself, like, I have only recently gotten into like streaming within the past like 4 to 5 years, and that's not because my family has some huge bespoke heirloom quality physical media collection. It was just streaming was not part of my family's repertoire. And truth be told, like, my family, streaming services are very interesting in my household, to say the least. Let's put it that way. I'm not snitching on anybody, but like, I know my VHS collection is kind of mid. That being said, a lot of these have just been, secondhand, all of that. I don't have like anything crazy. I did grow up in the era of the video store. I grew up firmly in the era of Blockbuster, Hollywood Video, Family Video. I rented Persona 5 from Family Video. And I think a lot of my taste and my memories and my relationship to media is formed in the way it's been formed because of the video store. So I'd like to take a little bit of time to just look at that in depth, the history of the formats, as well as just a little bit of what we've lost with the lack of physical media being a mainstay in everyday people's lives. Because something that probably I will touch on a little bit more is how ubiquitous and how everywhere physical media truly was. So let's get into it with as lame as this is gonna sound, the invention of television. And the reason why I say you need to go back to the invention of television to understand the history of physical media and home media is due to the fact that when television was invented, it was designed to be similar to radio, meaning that most of the time, if not all the time, you were really only watching live events. The idea of watching something pre-recorded on television was not even a thought in anybody's eye, which is really interesting because I'd argue that now mostly everything we consume is pre-recorded. With TV being treated similar to how movies were viewed at this moment in time, if you missed it, you missed it, with the occasional anniversary rescreening. Television was only a live format medium. In fact, the invention of videotape didn't happen until 1951. It wouldn't be until 1971 until Sony developed the U-Matic, which was the first video cassette. And this U-Matic, though intended for consumers, was only really used by networks to record programs and distribute them overseas. So in 1972, Philips made the VCR. I also think it's an important note and distinction to make that the earliest VCRs/VHSs were sold and marketed as television recording devices before anything else, and I think that is an important footnote just to acknowledge as the story and history of video rental and VHS unfolds, because we'll see a lot of what's the word? um there'll be a lot of combativeness to the nature of VHS, and that combativeness comes from the original use case of the VCR. So keep that in mind. Which allowed for video recording onto a cassette. Though at this moment in time, the VHS was only designed for home videos and home movies. The first real attempt to bring mainstream media as well as educational media would be Cartravision. Though Cartravision ended up flopping due to it being a more proprietary and closed system, meaning that you had to buy a Cartravision set with a Cartravision player built into it, both of which were extremely pricey upon release, as well as the lending libraries being expensive as well. In '75, when the Betamax hit the market, the true follow-up to the U-Matic, that we began to see the first inkling of home media and what began the format war. Though the format war was easily lost and then won at the same time due to the Betamax only being able to hold an hour per reel, the VHS being able to store up to 2 hours of video. Hence why the VHS and the VCR ended up winning out the format war and beginning what we know as the home media renaissance. But this is early technology, meaning that it is extremely expensive to buy into. So now we're at the dawn of watching movies in your home. But the thing is that there was obviously a lot of pushback about this. And at this moment in time, if you had the money, you could easily record an hour to 2 hours of your favorite TV shows at home to watch back at your own leisure. It was expensive, it wasn't popular, but it was something that could be done. Fast forward to the year 1977, in which Andre Belay convinces a bunch of Fox executives to license 50 movies to his company Magnetic Video. While I don't know how much Belay paid per movie, I know that he did charge $50, which is the equivalent of $791 today adjusted for inflation. This is on top of your $10 club membership. It's about $50 adjusted for inflation, but for a little under $825, you gained access to the Video Club of America and a copy of your choice of any of the first 50 films they leased to Video, as well as the hesitation to allow people to watch videos in their home was due to the fact that you could own a copy of a tape and show it to as many people as you wanted to, as many times as you wanted to. Therefore, they were priced as such. Going around 81, what I would describe as the war on video rental would begin to rear its head. The war on video rental was essentially the distributors, studios, etc. upping the prices of the individual video cassettes to maximize the profits that they got on the video rentals, because they felt as though they were losing a lot of money. So the studios over time began upping the price of the individual video cassette, meaning that the video rental stores now had to pay more to get these cassettes to the public. For example, a retail cost for a single title was about $79.99, which is around $297 in modern currency adjusted for inflation, meaning that they'd have to rent the title out at the price of $5 per rental 16 times for them to break even for the cost of the individual cassette. That is before profit. And adjusted for inflation, that's around $18 per rental. Because video cassettes could be rented out as many times as they wanted, they changed a lot of the rules regarding the wholesale process, because people at, like, say, Warner felt as though they were giving their crown jewels away. So what they did was they made a bundle system where you had to buy a suite of rental video cassettes. Bigger tentpole films like, say, Ghostbusters or Star Wars were not available to buy and could only be rented, meaning that these bigger tentpole films weren't even available to purchase on home video. You could only rent them. The idea was that you would sign to authorize these films, and if you weren't an authorized dealer, yeah, you might have this old Disney movie from like 16 years ago, but you don't have the hot one, Dumbo, which dropped like 2 months ago. That being said, during this rental library era of VHS rental that was done as a package deal through the studio systems, a lot of these were designed as leases, meaning that they had to rent the video out X amount of times before, like, their lease was up. Though in my research, this is where it gets a little bit hazy, is that, like, It's said that the video rental store was allowed to do with what they chose to do with that videotape after they met the amount of rentals for the lease. What I find really interesting is that I know for a fact that some of these tentpole films were designed to only be rented for a long period of time. I think Star Wars was like that in particular, meaning you couldn't buy Star Wars for years. You could only rent it. I think after that, the video rental stores owned the tapes and could rent them out as many times as they liked. That being said, reselling and repackaging previously viewed tapes became a huge part of the VHS rental system, rental economy, and the ecosystem in general. But visually, there was distinct and unique packaging for a lot of these rental tapes, though the tapes themselves were not uniquely coded or packaged, though they usually had a not for home distribution or purchase like bumper at the start of the film. Though the part that I can't really find like concrete evidence on is that there was a visual distinction in the cassette tapes themselves, in that like they were of a particular colored plastic or featured some type of notable motif. So as you can see, I mentioned Dumbo prior. The Dumbo ejector flap, the flap that like protects the actual like tape itself, is like gold and instead of like solid black. Though this is the only like example I can find of concrete evidence of the tape cassettes themselves having a unique visual language to distinguish them from regular home use videotape. Also, if you look, a lot of these rental only video cassettes don't have SKUs on them. That's as far as I'll go with the visual distinction of rental only VHS tapes, only because I want to save that part for the packaging of VHS section of this video. These movies also had a set amount of rental units that they were allowed to distribute, meaning you could only rent out Star Wars, say 50 times, or you would then have to rebuy it for an unlimited license that would allow you to rent out that film indefinitely. This program was absolutely dog shit and awful, and they abandoned it by 82 though. It made many video rental stores feel as though they were being bullied into paying for a single movie twice or paying for films twice. I don't know, I find the whole thing really funny, but I also think it's really interesting too that by 85, all this war in court back and forth was settled. There were also extremely petty lawsuits filed just to kind of get a leg up against video rental stores. Ironically, and even more so, we would actually see a very similar series of lawsuits play out in regards to video game rental in the 1990s, though a lot of the cause for concern that these distributors and studios had as far as video rental was due to tape duplication, because a huge part and a large draw factor for the ownership and use case of VHSs was the ability to record your own programs. So to record your own or duplicate tapes at home, you would need a dual deck VCR, which I didn't know anybody that had, and I grew up around them in the early 2000s and 90s, and they were probably relatively cheap by that point. Oh, I totally understand their fear, and I'm sure somebody's fucking cousin or uncle in their basement was literally duplicating every single tape they rented. Hey, so I'm adding this in post just because I really want to give a little bit more context and credence to the way VHS was used during the era. I know that in my personal household and my income bracket, like lower middle class, in 2003 was when we got the ability to burn VHSs, because we weren't able to burn VHSs because we didn't have a burnable VCR. And it wasn't until we upgraded to a VCR DVD combo player that we were able to record programs off the television. But I don't think we could put in a second piece of media and then copy it over. I think that was truly a upper middle class luxury item. I know that we had a duplicatable tape deck in the house, but that wasn't until like years past like cassettes prime. And I think even judging by, like, if my memory is correct, the visual language of it was like a late 90s model. So it wasn't like, it was a very late era thing. All to say is that like a lot of this boogeyman of like copyright protection and duplication, while yes, I understand that the VCR was sold similarly to a DVR, most people did not record programs at home. That was not a common thing. That was a upper middle class to middle class thing, especially because you had to pay for like the cassettes themselves, the VHS cassettes. Most people were not recording programs till the DVR came on, or came around. Like, I cannot stress to you that enough. And the reason I know it was the year 2003, by the way, is that, like, the Cat in the Hat movie dropped, and I was, like, really hyped about that. But that being said, I remember when we got the ability to record stuff onto VHS, it truly was a game changer, bro. We had all the Beethoven movies. I had, like, 4 Mary-Kate and Ashley movies, bro. I was living large, bro. I was getting every movie I wanted at home. But that wasn't until the tail end of VHS, and we were already moving to DVD at that point. So, like, I totally understand and I get it, though. What is an interesting note is that with this litigation, all of this, you know, the video game crash of, like, 83, this is partially the reason why PC games have unique serial keys. Really interesting because console games don't require that, but they also came with anti-piracy measures built into the console systems, etc., etc. I don't know. But yeah, in the timeline, it's 1990-ish right now. VHS is most definitely king, mainly due to the accessibility and affordability of it. That means said, you know, there was still Laserdisc around, but they were also bulky, mildly more expensive, and you also had to flip them. But also mainly the flourishing rental market of VHS, as well as the burgeoning secondhand market of VHS, was the reason why they were so popular throughout all the way into the 2000s. But in 1995, a new challenger arrived, and that would come in the form of DVD. Though, because of the ubiquity and ease of duplication for VHSs, VHS is an era of video and movies that is regarded very fondly for a lot of people, but it's also regarded with a lot of anger, frustration, and contempt, mainly due to the amount of shovelware and just kind of quick turnaround profit films and works got released on the medium. Essentially, VHS distribution was as ubiquitous as online video distribution is today, and contemporarily speaking, meaning that not too similar to those 1,000 games in one compilations, you had people doing much the same for children's media, old cartoons, and public domain works, putting them out on VHS and putting them out for a quick profit. Though, most importantly and more than anything, VHS changed and shaped availability for video media as a whole. Remember, prior to the invention of the VCR and VHS, the only way to transmit video was via a live feed similar to radio. Hence why there's a huge weird world of training videos, how-to videos, accompaniment videos, workout videos, tutorial videos, stuff of all different levels of video quality put out on VHS. But it also, in a lot of ways, democratized video distribution, putting big budget Hollywood blockbusters on the same playing field and shelves as smaller indie titles. Hence why the world of VHS horror is so large, cavernous, and everlasting. I'd also just like to say that if it wasn't for the preservation of a lot of this media, thanks to companies and groups like Everything is Terrible, we wouldn't have a lot of internet culture and pop culture that we have today. Things like You with Kazoo.
Wait a minute! Who are you?
As well as Dwayne Duncan, whatever his name is.
And Dwayne, I was wondering, what fashion trends do you follow?
Well, I usually look in magazines or see what the kids at school are wearing.
Dwayne!
A lot of early internet culture comes from people digging, archiving, and unearthing a lot of this lost and forgotten shovelware media that nobody really would have given a shit about had somebody not taken the time to sit through a fucking KFC training video, right? And I cannot stress how much of modern internet culture and modern pop culture as a whole we owe to the documentation, preservation, and celebration of early video medium as a culture, or the early video medium that is VHS as a culture. It's essentially yield equivalent of a group of friends bored a couple weekends out one summer with $10,000, a couple beers, shooting a film and putting it on YouTube. This accessibility of VHS also allowed for quick, easy duplication and distribution on a global scale, hence why anime had its boom in the tail end of the 90s like it did, thanks to the ubiquity of VHS. Most people who grew up in that era had their formative memories and their subculture revolve around VHSs themselves. Not too dissimilar to how people bootleg music in, say, Russia, not being able to get the media there. They relied on themselves and one another to create community and formatively trade and send these works to one another. Speaking of community, many a community and subculture revolved around VHS. In fact, according to Yale, they estimate that only about 40 to 45% of content ever been distributed on VHS has made its way to digital. Keep in mind that any topic, subculture, and or genre found its way to VHS at some point in time. For example, Propaganda Magazine, founded in 1982, the largest and most popular magazine in the goth subculture, had a huge run of videos in 91 through 94 with their video zine. Though these works weren't the ones that ended up in video rental stores. But this is a huge part in why many a person tends to collect or gravitate towards VHS, just older niche works. Though a lot of the older niche works on VHS or on the medium as a whole tend to skew more horror, because as I've said on this channel before, horror is a subgenre of fantasy, or fantasy is horror. Horror doesn't really exist by a broad standard, right? It's a catch-all term. It's to say that there's a huge depth and plethora of independent cinema on VHS, many of which is yet to been unearthed, though up to the degree of quality is absolutely varied. Now, this is something that you don't really hear brought up a lot, but because there was a brevity of just, subpar, mid, and lackluster works on the VHS market, you get what is a very fine line between general audience and adult work. Especially when you consider and look at the fact that a lot of adult media, yes, porn, was being put out on the medium at this point in time. So, with that being said, it would make a lot of sense why a store and a chain like Blockbuster, which had a hard stance against adult media, porn, or more exploitative or niche underground movies and work, that tried and favored more blockbuster and, pun intended, more larger studio mainstream works becoming popular. Weird way to word that, but what I was trying to say is Blockbuster became popular because they didn't sell adult movies, and it makes sense because the general consumer was not looking for off the beaten path horror movies, exploitation movies, etc. Though depending on who you ask, this is a huge detriment to the industry as a whole because it is a bit of a consolidation of power. Though that isn't to say Blockbuster didn't have indie works or the beaten path or more adult works. There was still tons of that. They just kind of favored a more family-friendly guideline and in the red tape bracket of the MPAA style of film. The reason I bring that up is because it was a large talking point in one of the documentaries I watched in the history of VHS. I think me personally, I'm 50-50 on it. Yes, a lot of these works are probably dog shit and it's not really a huge cultural loss, but for the sake of preservation, I understand the frustration and annoyance, especially when it comes to the skewing of taste, consolidation of power. But these smaller mom and pop shops, the nostalgia for them are why a lot of people lament video rental. But these smaller mom and pop stores also were the reason why somebody like Quentin Tarantino fell in love with film and filmmaking in general. So the argument here is a more curated video library versus a more general, broad, and having more copies of the mainstream movie to rent, rather than having a bunch of off the beaten path, more niche films. Each side has its pros, each side has its cons. I don't know. Have you ever wanted to visit steamy jungles, grassy plains, and the dark, dark depths of the ocean? Well, now you can and more with ZooBook. Did you ever want to learn surprising, neat, and interesting facts about the unique and wonderful animals that live there? Well, now you can through the delightful full-color pages of ZooBooks. And don't worry, because if it breathes, we made a ZooBookonic. ZooBook Mummy, ZooBook Otter, ZooBook Gator, and Frog. ZooBook The Prehistoric Times. ZooBook Fishes, bro. We got DNA x-rays. You can read it. Why is there a monkey in your house? Through this limited special TV offer, or if you steal your mom's credit card, you can get 12 issues of ZooBooks for just $19.99. And guess what? If you steal your mom's credit card right now and you act today, we'll throw in the elephant issue. You didn't even know about elephant. And don't worry, there's tons more Zoo Joy to be had. I'll throw in some free zoo stickers for you. But wait, I'm gonna give you an offer that's better than all the steamy jungles you can think of. If you act today for $19.99, I'll give you the tiger poster. That's right, the tiger poster! Look how excited he is to get his ZooBooks and his tiger poster! For just $19.99, bro, you can get all the steamy jungles, grassy plains that you can think of. Call 1-800-525-2715. That's $19.95 for 12 issues. And a tiger poster!
Why are you here today in this particular video store?
Well, because I used to work at this video store for 5 years. I was behind the counter, charging people late fees, recommending movies and stuff, and now as everything's kind of come full circle because my movies come out on video, and this is the opening day, and so I'm here to send it off.
Okay, so
So depending on who, what, when, where, and why, the packaging of VHSs can differ greatly. Now, the most common packaging you'll see for VHSs are going to be your cardboard slip sleeves. Early VHSs had the most variety. For example, clamshells were fairly common. Soft clamshells, that is, similar to the clamshells that you found on children's media. And I think soft clamshells, it's not outright stated, is probably due to the durability of them. This is what most diamond labeled Disney films are going to be sold in, most children's work, like I said. The early cardboard big box, which essentially was like similar to a gatefold record but with a VHS set, not to be confused with the comic big box, meant to mimic the design of a comic book, obviously like its name implies. Then you also had standardization in certain VHS lineups, like the RCA releases, which came with this iconic red border around them, a uniform font on one side, and then the films like specialty font on the other. And of course, one of the earliest companies to put out films on home video, CBS Fox, did have a somewhat uniformity to their releases, with the iconic logo being on its spine and cover art. Though hard clamshells were fairly common too, these were usually repackages done by the video rental stores themselves, taking those slip sleeve covers and slicing them up and putting them in these more durable clamshell cases. Though these clamshell cases were easy to open, but they weren't if you were more physically impaired or not as strong like a child, hence why soft clamshells were popular with children's media. Though it makes sense that companies didn't want to put this out as a traditional release method because, you know, plastic costs money. Though ironically, occasionally you would find TV shows in collector's edition hard shell cases, though it was fairly uncommon for VHSs to be released with plastic cases in general. Even collector's edition TV show box sets came in cardboard slip sleeves 9 times out of 10. Also had these squeeze cases which were used uniquely at Hollywood Video. And then, ironically enough, unlike vinyl, rarely did they have colored VHS tapes. Though certain companies towards the end of VHS's life cycle did do it to denote their releases as part of their greater catalog. So famously, Nickelodeon released all their releases on orange VHSs. And Barney released all their works on white VHSs, and VeggieTales, I believe, did green. Though towards the end of VHS's life cycle, some releases did have special release gimmicks, such as Donnie Darko being released on a blue cassette tape, and then also I believe E.T. came with colored reels. What's really fascinating is that if you look at foreign territories releases of VHS cassettes, they really are dolled up to the max. So for example, Spanish Disney releases have branded reels, and they come in this purplish tape. I'm so mad that like a year and a half, 2 years ago, we just got rid of all our VHSs because we used to have tons of Barney tapes, we used to have tons of VeggieTales, all of that, and I wish I could physically show you some of these. I don't know. I don't really go back and rewatch kids' movies unless I'm going to sleep, kids' movies put you to sleep type shit. Though I think this is a fun little segue into the world of DVD, and since I have it on VHS, why not show you Legally Blonde? Which, yeah, Legally Blonde and Legally Blonde 2, there's absolutely nothing interesting about this packaging, nor do they have unique pink cassette tapes. But ironically, the DVD came with a pink DVD case. Now, was this done for any particular rhyme or reason? Not really. Just certain DVD releases got colored cases, and this is common for both children's and adult media, though it was far more common in children's media. I remember Lizzie McGuire came in a white DVD case, and I pulled up a stack of random DVDs just so that you could see like how many of these came in colored cases. Like, yeah, it was a novelty, but it was fairly common for children's media. I don't know, I was the only boy amongst like 3 households of mostly girls. But just looking at pictures, a motif that I am seeing is that a lot more feminine movies are put in white cases, but in particular, all the Strawberry Shortcake films came in pink DVD cases. I know Legally Blonde did too. I'm sure like other girly movies came in. I think Mean Girls was sold with a pink DVD case. I don't know, Shrek wasn't sold in a green DVD case. The Simpsons wasn't sold in a yellow DVD case. But I do think it is very uniquely interesting as a marketing standpoint that these movies had the motifs and kind of packaging extend to the outer packaging of these works as well. And this more adventurous packaging was a huge draw to the DVD era, but also in the rental era of DVD, not only was it more convenient to store, they could also store more on a single media, hence why special features became a thing. Inside, as somebody who collects Criterions, has been on the podcast, etc., it is important to note that Criterion actually was part of the pioneering of special features, bonus features, etc. on their Citizen Kane Laserdisc. That being said, Laserdisc was more so treated as a niche specialist medium, rather than like an enthusiast, hobbyist, like commercial grade medium. So they were sold as a luxury commodity, which is why they never really peaked in the rental economy. They were also kind of a pain in the ass to use, but it's its own thing. But yeah, Criterion is part of the reason why we have like the cinema culture we have today, and special features even exist in the way they do. Though that being said, the DVD era gave us a lot of fun, gimmicks, and joy. But because if you were renting or borrowing a work for a weekend, you might watch it 2-3 times and then go through 4 or 5 special features because you just have this piece of media and maybe what's on cable. This is why DVD binders became such a large part of America. Most people didn't care about DVD cases and they were bulky, took up space, etc., etc. Though ironically, I grew up in the bootleg era, so we got our movies from the bootleg DVD man when I was a kid. And honestly, I would not change that for anything in the world because I got to watch so many more movies as a kid. If it came out when I was a kid, I watched it. And if it was aimed at kids and it came out when I was a kid, I probably watched it. Being said, we didn't keep a lot of these because nobody wants to watch a shaky theater cam of The Wild, or I don't know, Over the Hedge, but like this is how I watched Over the Hedge for decades and it was like my favorite movie. Eventually like we'd end up buying the nicer, full release of the film, but that was not as common. I think during disc-based media and the disc-based media era, piracy was more prevalent. So I know my room is a bit of a mess, but I also need to do these closing thoughts. That being said, so if my knowledge is correct, like, I think a lot of people's relationship with VHS as well as DVD is very similar to my own, where when we did finally get a recordable tape machine or like VCR, we were kind of making that transition to DVD. But what's really interesting is that I feel like DVD was so everywhere, and I cannot stress that enough, dude. You would find $2, $3, $5 DVD piles, but you would find the same for VHSs, right? And VHS rental as well as pre-owned VHS was damn near everywhere. The grocery store, dude, 7-Eleven, dude, you could find them any and everywhere. But like I said, I grew up in the bootleg DVD like cycle, right? Like that was how we watched movies in my household. That's how I grew up consuming a lot of my favorite movies like Willy Wonka, Alice in Wonderland, etc., etc. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is what I'm saying. But during the DVD era, I did not really know anybody that was renting DVDs on a fairly regular basis, but I knew a ton of people who were renting games on a regular basis, and this is partially due to the fact that game rental wasn't at the library yet. I know now you can rent out video games at the library, but that was 122% not a thing when I was a kid. Though I figured I will show you part of my own, these are my own personal bootleg Blu-rays. Now, bootleg Blu-rays are like a very niche thing. I get them I usually get them because I love a movie that is not available in my region and it hasn't been released in my region, or it is super inaccessible, like an anime work, etc. I do plan to upgrade these. I know that Third Window released like the Nobuhiro Obayashi collection, but the thing is that I missed that, and that collection is now worth $200 or $300, and that's what kind of sucks about Blu-ray collecting at this moment in time, is that it is a very niche collector's commodity. That being said, I think these do a good job of kind of illustrating. These are the style of like cases that I got growing up, but they would be black, shitty Xerox cover, and then usually they would take and just Xerox some disc art on here. So this is what, like, imagine this, but like it was Spider-Man 2. But I think what's really cute is that because this is a niche hobbyist enthusiast market, you know, this is my Nobuhiro Obayashi collection. The original cover art was kind of shitty, so I redid it. But again, it is literally somebody just scribbling some text on a Blu-ray. But they also gave me this little handout flyer for other movies and Blu-rays that they have that are available through them as a small independent distributor. And I think it's that it's a just true love of the game and love of media and cinephilia and all of that. Like, I grew up with a region-free DVD player in the house, partially because we had bootleg DVDs, right? I grew up in that very not as gate-kept media landscape, and I feel like part of the reason why I was able to see a lot of movies that I was able to see when I was a kid is not only due to the dollar movie, but due to watching bootlegs. But I don't know, I hope and pray that physical media outlives us all. Here's my copy of The Snow Woman, which I literally imported just to rewatch it. But a lot of these movies are kind of hard to find, even on like the piracy market. Like, you can't Pirate Bay these movies, right? So when you get to this certain point of the, what do you call it? Not avalanche, iceberg, it just becomes very hard to find movies. That being said, I love movies, I love sharing movies, I love talking about movies. Do I want to? I would totally buy these legally if they were more so available, but they're not. And that's kind of the thing about copyright, because I'm not taking money away from anybody if they're not giving me said product, right? This is a facilitated necessity. That being said, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend some time with me. As always, I'm greatly appreciative. Maybe I might make a sequel to this where I talk more about DVD and game rental and those worlds, but this is already long enough. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend some time with me. I'm, as always, greatly appreciative. You don't have to go home, but unfortunately the video is over and you cannot stay here. Have a nice one. Goodbye.
I stayed pretty busy, and I think she kind of liked me, because she never let me check out bad movies. She'd always push me to try an older Hollywood classic. I started to like them, and I think watching them made me older too. At least I hoped Beth thought so.
Here's looking at you, kid. Well, Josh, how'd you like Casablanca?
It was pretty good, but I would have liked it better if Bogart had gotten back together with Ingrid Bergman instead of letting her leave with Laszlo.
Well, it's nice to see a man who's a romantic. But you'll have to admit, it took a pretty strong character to let the woman he loved go away with another man.
I suppose so.
You know, a lot of people think Casablanca is the best movie ever made in Hollywood. And I bet you'll never guess who turned down the role of Rick before Humphrey Bogart got it.
Who?
Ronald Reagan.
No!
Honest, would I kid my favorite movie buff? Hey, listen, if you like Bogart, you ought to check out The Maltese Falcon, or Treasure of the Sierra Madre, or even The African Queen with Katharine Hepburn. And if you like westerns, any John Wayne movie directed by John Ford is great. Come on, I'll show you.